Namaste. First of all, hello from Taipei. My name is Benjamin, and this video is specifically for Corey. However, if you think that this video might be useful for you, you can try to participate in this what's going to be a lower back, lumbar spine therapeutic practice. It's not going to be too long because this is for, like I said, Corey, who has a bulging disc in his lower back. And I'm not a doctor. And if you are going to use this, you have to have the sensibility to ask your doctor if this is going to be useful for you. And you're going to have to do it at your own risk because, like I said, this is for Corey. This is going to be useful for anybody who actually has lower back issues. Some things that are going to be functional here that are going to help this practice: a belt, it's kind of a long one. We call it a yoga strap. A couple of these blocks, a chair. The main thing that we're going to be doing in this practice is focusing on lumbar spine. And what's going on is the lumbar spine has what's referred to in anatomical terms as a lordosis. So that's an inward moving curve. The lordosis typically moves in this way. So you can see here, the lower back curves inward, right? Beneath the lower back is a sacral curve, which is called kyphosis, upper back curve, which is also a kyphosis, and then we have one more lordosis in our neck. Now, we all have different body types, okay? And every one of us is going to have a different measure of these curves. And there is not a single person in the world who is symmetrical. Although some of us are closer, nobody is balanced right and left, front and back. There's going to be people who have bigger lumbar curves, there's going to be people who have smaller lumbar curves. Those people who have smaller lumbar curves have a greater tendency towards the injury which Corey has, which is a bulging disc moving out to the back. So what a bulging disc is you can imagine you have these stacks of bones on top of each other that are your vertebrae, okay? They stack together, and if the bones were just bone on bone, well, then everybody would have a greater risk of arthritis, and it would happen at a pretty young age. So in between each of these bones, there is a spinal disc, which is some articular cartilage. Not articular cartilage, what's it called? Fibrous cartilage, I think is the proper name for it. And in between in the center of the fibrous cartilage is a little, like a little gel. And so directly to the back plane of the body from the intervertebral discs is your spinal column, your nervous system, the actual nerves that move from your brain down through the tip of your spine and radiate out at different parts of your skeleton to your fingertips, to your toe tips, and of course every other place in between. And when that disc gets pressurized, if it's not an even pressure, what's going to happen is that little gelatin in the middle is going to start pushing. Okay, it can push in any direction theoretically. I've never heard of anybody with a lumbar spine bulging disc that bulged forward or to the sides, but it definitely could possibly happen. The thing is the reason that it happens is because people do this. You go to pick up something, or they pick up this, and their whole pelvis is what's in what do we call it, retroversion. And they pick up something, and it's like nothing. It's like literally like this is like maybe 200 grams. And they pick it up off the phone like, oh, the disc bulges out. And so essentially what it is, it's a dysfunction of movement at the hip joint, okay? So if we use our legs properly, what's going to happen is we're going to bend at the hips, and when we bend forward, we really bend from this place, which is called, in common terms, the hip joint. Okay? There's the head of the femur that sits in the acetabulum of the pelvis, and then we would bend forward. You can see I still have a little bit of a lumbar back curve here. Okay? Now, whenever you go to pick something up, this is the most kind of healthy movement. However, because of the way we are not necessarily thinking about that. And so what'll happen is we'll like, oh, it's easier to do this. Okay, so we don't use the muscles of our legs. We allow our upper body to go into this sort of just dysfunctional position. So we go to pick something up, and what happens is the pressure that's put on that intervertebral disc pushes the little gelatin towards the back plane of the body, towards the nerves. Now, those nerves, if that gelatin gets far enough and it creates a bulge in the back of the disc, then that disc actually starts pushing out. There's a website. I'll put a link up with this video of the website. It's called, there's a thing on my Facebook, it's called Anatomy in Motion. If you go to my Facebook page, Facebook, my name is Yoga Life. And I have a link on there to this Anatomy in Motion page that shows bulging disc. And essentially what it is, well, it's like, what's it like? It's a bulge. So that bulge presses the nerves, and then pain happens. So somebody goes on to pick something up, that bulge finally expands and it pushes the nerves, and it's like, oh, instant back pain. Awful, excruciating. Sometimes it's not. However, it's never going to be enjoyable. So if that bulging disc gets worse, it becomes herniated, so that gelatin actually completely breaks open the fibrous cartilage and presses out back into the nerves. I'm not sure what happens when it gets better, if it gets better completely. Like I said, I'm not a doctor, but a herniated disc is worse than a bulging disc for obvious reasons, because a hernia is where the stuff from the inside breaks through and pushes the outside. Just like if somebody gets a hernia in their abdomen, what happens is the abdominal muscles are not strong enough, they tear open when somebody picks up something really heavy, and then intestines come out. That's another video, we'll do that later. So herniation is worse than bulge. Same reason that it happened, because of dysfunction with the hip joint. Okay, so I guess that's about enough explanation, enough talking. This practice is going to be mainly focused on creating a lordosis curve, which what it'll do is it will, again, will increase this curve of the lumbar spine. So what we will do is we will use biomechanics in the body to create pressure on the back of the spine now, okay? So this creates pressure on the front of the spine, pushes the disc backwards. So now we're going to do this kind of stuff in this practice. We're going to put pressure on the back of the spine and push the disc back in, okay? And what that's going to do is it's going to do some stretching of our hamstrings here. It's going to engage some of the muscles of our lower back here. A lot of things are going to happen. I guess that's enough explanation. Okay, so a really simple practice to do, Corey, that you're going to do every morning. Okay, you're going to get out of bed and you're going to walk over to your coffee table. You're going to take your hands on the coffee table. You're going to take your feet about as wide as your hips, maybe a little wider. You're going to bend your knees and you're just going to really stick your bum up in the air. Now, anybody that has this kind of back injury is going to very likely have an excessive tightness at the back of these muscles here called the hamstrings. There's other muscles that are going to be tight, some muscles up here in the bone region, some muscles down here
If we get into what's called anatomy trains, a guy named Thomas Myers, he will teach you that from the ball of your foot here, a line of myofascial tissue goes all the way across the arch of your foot, across your heel, up the Achilles tendon here, across the muscles in the back of the leg, gastrocnemius, across the hamstrings, sit bone, across the, I think, sacrotuberal ligament to the muscles of the lower back, all the way up the lower back to the back of your neck, up across the back of your neck into the base just above your eyebrows here. And so there's going to be tightness in that whole plane. So in general, we focus on this kind of stuff here when we do this practice. So you're going to wake up in the morning, take your hands on your table or a chair. As you notice, I'm using a chair here. You're just going to bend your knees, stick your bum up in the air. So bending our knees does two things, okay? It disconnects a lot of the pulling on the line of energy in the back of your legs, because right here where these two muscles on the back of your calf called gastrocnemius, they cross up and they attach to your femur. Your three hamstrings cross down from your knee joint onto the bottom of your leg and attach to your tibia. Okay? So we bend the knees and those muscles decrease their tension. And so we can actually be a little bit more healthy, more safe in our lower back. Another thing that happens is when we bend our knees like this, what happens is the muscles of the front of our legs engage. Now this does something important because it sends a message to our brain that these muscles can let go a little bit, okay? Any time where we have opposing muscles in our body, they have a direct relationship with each other. So if one set of those opposing muscles is completely disengaged and completely relaxed, what happens is the opposing set of muscles creates excessive tension to create more stability, okay? Kind of like keeping safe, because if both sets of the muscles were completely relaxed, what would happen? Collapse would occur, joints would become unstable, pain would happen, right? So when we engage these muscles here, the muscles in the back in direct opposition to those muscles, your brain says, okay, let go a little bit, relax. So we bend our knees, engage these muscles stretch more efficiently. And really stick your bum in the air as high as you can. Now, notice there's going to be a tendency to do this. Arms straight is going to help this action a lot, because the lower down your upper body goes, the less curve you're going to have here. So arms straight, bum up in the air. Work with making your legs straighter without losing any of this bum up in the air action, okay? This is an imbalanced action, but it's the exact opposite of the imbalance that created the injury. So I'm not teaching balance here. I'm teaching imbalance with the intention of creating health in the lower back, or creating changing dysfunction. Okay. So if we were to only do this, we would create a different kind of dysfunction, but this dysfunction is going to be functional. Functional. Okay, so knees bent, bump in the air, stretch. Stretch, stretch, stretch. As you stretch, really focus on working the muscles of your legs. If now you can't get a good stretch, just bend your knees more. And then you stick your bum up. And then you work with stretching your legs straight. Whenever you do this, you really focus on this arch here. Straight your legs, straight your legs, straight your legs. Okay. So now from here, what we can do is we can take our chair a little bit forward. Okay. Now we can start to walk our hands back a little bit, okay? Same thing. Arms are going to be straight, knees bent, bum up in the air. Knees bent, bum up in the air, knees bent, bum up in the air, knees bent, bum up in the air. You can even lift your toes so that your weight doesn't get too far forward in the ball of your foot, right? When you lift your toes, the strength moves more towards your hip, which is where we want to get more functional. So lift your heels. You'll notice my heels are not on the floor. That's okay. They can be on the floor, but when they're on the floor, you might notice something like this might happen. Okay? Knees bent, heels can lift or not. but we're really focusing on the action of bum up in the air, okay? Okay, now from here we can just walk forward. Okay, so all three of these positions are very similar, and they're all forward bending positions. Okay, so the forward bending positions are dangerous for this problem, because if the forward bend is done without a proper curve in the lumbar spine, what happens is this. This is the problem that created the injury. This is unhealthy forward bend. For somebody with this back problem, knees bent, bum up in the air, ribs are sticking out. Notice, again, this is imbalanced. Not going to worry about that. Later, we're going to focus on ribs in, still keeping this lumbar back, lumbar curve. Butt's going to squeeze, and then we're going to bend forward like this. But that's going to be a little too much now for somebody who has this problem. That's more balanced. However, ribs are going to come out, knees are going to bend here. This is a healthy forward bend for somebody who has this problem, okay? Now from here, another variation of the forward bend we call Adho Mukha Svanasana, or downward facing dog, okay? Again, a lot of times what's going to happen is this. See the lower back, arching in the wrong direction. So we bend the knees, we stick the bone up in the air, and we press back. We press back. Press thighs back, stick bum up, press thighs back, stick bum up. Now, if you can keep this action in the lumbar spine, if you can keep this curve here, we make the legs a little straighter. We make the legs a little straighter, we make the legs a little straighter, we make the legs a little straighter. The more straightness we get in these legs, the more intensity of the stretch. If it gets too much, this happens, dysfunction, okay? This is better than this with significance, okay? So first learn to bend your knees, stick your bum up in the air, reach way back, and then slowly, slowly make your legs straighter. Now from here, because we're working with this lumbar spinal intervertebral disc, bulging, we're going to go from here, we're going to take the knees on the floor so we can keep this here, because we don't want to lose this curve for anything, okay? And then we're going to come here, okay, and then we're going to sit back down. Now we can go through it all again. Go back to the beginning where you do the stretch, hands in the chair, bum up in the air, hands in the chair, bum up in the air, hands on the floor, bum up in the air. For this one, always start from here. Hello?
可以先暂停吗？
可以先这样。等一下。
And then from here, so you're always going to start from the floor and then come in this position here. That's three forward bends that are going to be super, super useful, and honestly, that's really all you need. However, there is going to be a bit more in this practice, which we're going to do right now.